Hello, 8th grade math. This is Mrs. Bird. This is your very first flipped classroom video. You're watching this in class today so that you can see examples of how this will be throughout the year when you're watching these videos at home and taking notes. You should have your yellow real number system foldable inside of your math journal right now, and we're going to get started with classifying numbers in the real number system. Right, I'd like you to find the box labeled natural numbers. The natural numbers also are called counting numbers sometimes, and they're the numbers that are used to count objects. These are the ones you learn when you're very first learning to count, like the number 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. Please take a minute to write those numbers. Inside of the box it says natural or counting numbers. And then we're going to look at the next box. The next box says whole numbers. Whole numbers include all of the natural numbers. They include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way on to infinity. But they have an extra number in their set, and that number is 0. Whole numbers include all of the natural numbers and 0. You can write whole numbers in a variety of ways. You could write the whole number 2 as 4 halves. Remember, 4 divided by 2 is 2. Please write that in your box, labeled whole numbers. You might see something written like the square root of 25. The square root of 25 is also a whole number because square root of 25 is 5. And you could see numbers just like you saw them in your natural numbers, like 6. All of these are whole numbers. They include all of the counting numbers and 0. All right, the next box we're going to look at are integers. Integers include all of the natural numbers. It includes all of their opposites or negatives and 0. So you notice the integer box is around the natural numbers and the whole numbers. So it includes all of those. But then we get to also have negative numbers like negative 3 or negative 10/5. Negative 10/5, negative 10 divided by 5 is 2. So that's a natural number's opposite. You might have negative 4. All of these are integers, as well as 0 and all of our natural numbers. Okay, around our natural numbers, whole numbers, and integers are rational numbers. Rational numbers are any number that can be written as a ratio in the form of a fraction. For instance, you might have the fraction negative 2/3. This does not fit in any of the previous categories because they did not include any fractions or decimals. Rational numbers include fractions because they're written as a ratio. You might have the fraction 1/2. That would be a rational number. You might see the fraction 5/8. That's a ratio of two numbers, 5 to 8. You could see decimals like 37 hundredths. 37 hundredths is a decimal that stops or terminates. We could write that as the fraction 37 over 100. You might see decimals like 75 hundredths. This is a rational number. We could write it as a fraction or ratio. 75 hundredths would be the same as 3/4. You could also see decimals that repeat, like 31 hundredths, repeating. If you have a bar that repeats, that is something that can be written as a fraction. So in our rational numbers, we include positive and negative fractions, and we include decimals that stop or repeat. Irrational numbers are any number that cannot be written as a ratio in the form of a fraction. So irrational numbers cannot be natural, whole, integers, or rational. These are only numbers that cannot be written as a fraction. Some examples might be the square root of 10. If we found the square root of 10, this would be a number with a decimal that continued on forever and never repeated. You might have something like the square root of 1.6. If we found the square root of 1.6, This is a decimal that would continue on forever. It does not terminate and it does not repeat. These are non-terminating and non-repeating decimals. We could not write them as fractions. Numbers like pi. We know that pi, we use 3.14 as an estimate, but pi as a number really continues on forever and never repeats. You might see a number like 0.101001000 that continues on. Yes, this has a pattern to it, but no, it does not ever repeat and it does not stop. That's what those dots at the end mean. It does not stop. So that would be an irrational number. Things like the square root of 2/3. 2/3 would be an irrational number, or the negative square root of 123. All of these would be decimals that never stop and never repeat. They cannot be written as a fraction. That is why we call them irrational. The top of your graphic organizer or foldable should look like this now. We should have all those numbers written that we just talked about. When you're following this at home, you can stop and rewind the video as you need to. So if you miss something that Miss Hager or I say, you can stop it, rewind it, and start it again. And let's take a minute to look at the bottom of your graphic organizer. This is also another way to organize the real number system. On the top half of the page, we had boxes that were inside of each other. The natural numbers were included as part of the whole numbers. The whole numbers were included as part of the integers. The integers were included as part of the rational numbers. So this is just a different way to show what we just talked about. Our real numbers are things that are made of rational and irrational numbers. So anything we can write as a rational number or an irrational number would make up our real number system. So we're going to split this into our rational numbers. We're filling in the bottom of our page, rational numbers. And irrational numbers. A subset of our rational numbers, or a smaller group of our rational numbers, were our integers. The rational numbers are made up of integers, those positive and negative whole numbers, but they included some extra pieces. So our rational numbers would be a larger group of numbers than our integers. The next group we had were our whole numbers. So our integers were made up of our whole numbers, and then it included our negatives. And then our smallest group we talked about were the natural numbers. The whole numbers were made up of our natural or counting numbers, except the whole numbers included the number 0. So this is just another way to organize the number system that we just talked about. All right, we're going to work on some practice next with our real number system, looking at these numbers and trying to classify where we could put each number. When you have your next video, you will be watching this at home. Make sure that you are following along as you do the video and you're filling out your foldable for that day. It is very, very important that you have these done each day so that you're ready for class when you come and you'll be able to work on whatever we're working on that day. Sometimes you'll hear Miss Haig's voice and sometimes you'll hear my voice. It'll switch between us about every 3 or 4 weeks. And if you have any questions the next day, make sure you write them on your journal or your math journal. Make sure you bring it with you to class, but make sure you write any questions down. So if you have confusion during the video and you don't quite understand it, be prepared when we come to talk about those things.